The desert sun beat down mercilessly on Forward Operating Base Delta, a small military outpost nestled in the rocky hills of Afghanistan's Helmand province. Staff Sergeant Marcus Rodriguez wiped the sweat from his forehead as he cleaned his rifle for the third time that morning. The routine had become second nature after 18 months of deployment, but today felt different. Something in the air carried an electric tension that made even the most seasoned soldiers uneasy. Marcus had enlisted in the Army straight out of high school in a small Texas town where military service was considered both an honor and a necessity. His father had served in Vietnam, his grandfather in Korea, and his great-grandfather in World War II. The Rodriguez family had a tradition of service that ran deeper than bloodlines. It was woven into the fabric of who they were. But, unlike his ancestors who fought conventional wars against clearly defined enemies, Marcus found himself in a conflict where the lines between friend and foe shifted like sand in the desert wind. The morning briefing had been routine. Intelligence reports suggested increased insurgent activity in the surrounding villages, but nothing out of the ordinary for the region. Captain Williams, their commanding officer, had emphasized the importance of maintaining vigilance while continuing their humanitarian missions. The unit had been working closely with local villagers to establish a medical clinic and provide clean water access to remote settlements. These missions were crucial for winning hearts and minds, but they also exposed the soldiers to significant risks. As Marcus finished his weapon maintenance, he noticed his squad mate, Private Danny Chen, pacing nervously near the communications tent. Danny was barely 19, fresh out of basic training, and still adjusting to the harsh realities of combat deployment. The young soldier had joined the Army to pay for college and support his immigrant family back in California. His parents had sacrificed everything to give him opportunities in America, and military service seemed like the fastest path to achieving the American dream they had envisioned for their son. "You okay, Chen?" Marcus called out, setting his rifle aside and approaching the younger soldier. Danny stopped pacing and turned toward Marcus with worry etched across his young face. "Sergeant, did you hear the radio chatter this morning? Something about a convoy getting hit near Checkpoint Bravo." Marcus had indeed heard the reports. A supply convoy had been ambushed just 12 kilometers from their position, resulting in 2 casualties and several wounded soldiers. The attack had been swift and coordinated, suggesting the insurgents had detailed knowledge of military movements in the area. Intelligence analysts were working overtime to determine if there had been a security breach or if enemy forces had simply gotten lucky. "Don't let it get to you," Marcus said, placing a reassuring hand on Danny's shoulder. "We follow protocols, stay alert, and watch each other's backs. That's how we all get home." But even as Marcus spoke these words of comfort, he felt the weight of uncertainty pressing down on him. Every mission carried risks, every patrol could be their last, and every decision could mean the difference between life and death for his men. The responsibility of leadership in combat was something no amount of training could fully prepare someone for. It was learned through experience, trial by fire, and sometimes devastating loss. The base alarm sounded at exactly 14:30 hours, cutting through the afternoon heat like a blade. Marcus grabbed his gear and sprinted toward the motor pool where Captain Williams was already briefing the Quick Reaction Force. Intelligence had received an urgent communication from a village elder requesting immediate medical assistance. A roadside bomb had exploded near a school, injuring several children and civilians. The situation required immediate response, but it also had all the hallmarks of a potential ambush scenario. Captain Williams stood before the assembled soldiers, his face grim but determined. He was a career officer from West Point who had served multiple combat deployments in Iraq and Afghanistan. His men respected him because he never asked them to do anything he wouldn't do himself, and he had a reputation for bringing his soldiers home alive. But today, the captain faced an impossible choice between saving innocent lives and potentially walking his men into a trap. "Listen up," Williams began, his voice carrying clearly across the gathering. "We have a humanitarian crisis developing in Kalayijangi, approximately 15 kilometers northeast of our position. Local sources report multiple casualties, including children, following an IED explosion near a village school. Medical evacuation is not immediately available due to sandstorm conditions affecting helicopter operations." Marcus felt his stomach tighten as he processed the information. Kala'ijangi was located in a known insurgent stronghold, accessed only by a narrow mountain pass that had been the site of numerous ambushes over the past year. Any convoy entering that area would be exposed and vulnerable, with limited escape routes and minimal air support options. It was exactly the kind of mission that kept soldiers awake at night, weighing the moral imperative to help against the tactical reality of survival. "Sir, what's our intelligence assessment of the threat level?" asked Sergeant First Class Johnson, the team's senior non-commissioned officer and a veteran of 4 combat deployments. Captain Williams consulted his briefing notes before responding. "Intelligence rates the threat as high probability for enemy contact. However, we have confirmed reports of injured children and civilians requiring immediate medical attention. The village elder who contacted us has been a reliable source in the past and has provided actionable intelligence that prevented several attacks on our forces." The moral complexity of the situation was not lost on anyone present. These soldiers had joined the military to serve their country and protect innocent people, but they also had families back home who were counting on their safe return. The balance between mission accomplishment and force protection was a constant struggle that defined modern military operations in asymmetric warfare environments. Marcus looked around at his fellow soldiers and saw the same internal conflict reflected in their faces. There was Rodriguez, whose wife had just given birth to their first child. Jackson, who was scheduled to return home in just 3 weeks to attend his sister's wedding. Williams himself, who had a teenage daughter waiting for him in Colorado. Each man carried personal stakes that made every decision more difficult and every risk more meaningful. "What's the recommended force structure for this mission?" Marcus asked, already knowing he would volunteer regardless of the answer. "We're looking at a reinforced squad with medical personnel and a communications specialist. Fast in, fast out, with minimal footprint to reduce signature and detection probability," Williams replied. "I won't lie to you men, this is voluntary. Anyone who wants to step back can do so without prejudice or questions asked." The silence that followed stretched for what felt like an eternity, but Marcus knew that none of these soldiers would back down from a mission to save innocent lives. It wasn't in their nature or their training to abandon people in need, regardless of the personal cost. They had sworn an oath to defend those who couldn't defend themselves, and that oath didn't come with asterisks or exceptions based on convenience or safety. "I'm in," Marcus said firmly, stepping forward. One by one, the other soldiers followed suit until the entire squad had volunteered for the mission. Private Chen was among them, his earlier nervousness replaced by steely determination. These young men understood that true courage wasn't the absence of fear, it was acting in spite of that fear when innocent lives hung in the balance. As they prepared for departure, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that this mission would be different from all the others. Perhaps it was intuition developed through months of combat experience, or maybe it was simply the weight of accumulated stress finally catching up with him. Whatever the source of his unease, Marcus made sure his personal effects were squared away and wrote a quick letter to his family back in Texas. The convoy consisted of 3 vehicles, 2 armored Humvees providing security escort and 1 medical evacuation vehicle equipped with trauma treatment capabilities. The route to Kala'ijangi would take them through hostile territory where insurgent forces had been increasingly active over the past month. Intelligence reports suggested enemy fighters had been using improvised explosive devices and complex ambush tactics to target coalition forces moving through the region. Dr. Sarah Matthews, the unit's physician assistant, was the only woman on the mission. She had volunteered for combat deployment despite having the option to serve in safer rear echelon positions. Sarah believed her medical skills were needed most where the fighting was heaviest and the casualties most severe. Her presence on dangerous missions had earned her the respect and admiration of every soldier in the unit, who knew she would risk her life to save theirs without hesitation. "Remember, we're going in fast and light," Captain Williams briefed the team one final time. "Primary objective is casualty evacuation and immediate medical treatment. Secondary objective is intelligence gathering on insurgent activity in the area. We maintain constant communication with base and abort the mission at the first sign of coordinated enemy resistance." Marcus checked his equipment one last time: ammunition, medical supplies, communication devices, and emergency signaling equipment. Every piece of gear had been tested and retested because in combat, equipment failure often meant mission failure, and mission failure could mean death for both soldiers and civilians. The weight of responsibility pressed heavily on his shoulders as he considered the lives depending on their success. The convoy rolled out of forward operating base Delta at exactly 15:45 hours, kicking up clouds of dust as they headed into the unforgiving Afghan landscape. Marcus rode in the lead vehicle, scanning the terrain for signs of enemy activity while maintaining radio contact with base operations. The road to Kala-i-Jangi wound through rocky hills and narrow valleys that provided countless opportunities for ambush positions. 20 minutes into the journey, Marcus spotted something that made his blood run cold. Fresh tire tracks leading off the main road toward a cluster of abandoned buildings that intelligence had identified as a possible insurgent staging area. The tracks were too new to be from previous patrols and too heavy to belong to civilian vehicles. Someone had been moving equipment or personnel through this area very recently, and that someone was likely hostile. "Control, this is Reaper 6, Marcus radioed back to base. We have fresh vehicle sign near grid reference 41 SMD 12345 67890. Tracks appear to lead toward abandoned compound previously identified as possible enemy position." The response came back immediately, copy Reaper 6. Continue mission but maintain heightened alert status. Air support is standing by if needed. As they continued toward their destination, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. It was a sensation every combat veteran knew, the prickle of unseen eyes tracking your movement, calculating distance and timing for an attack that might come at any moment. The desert seemed to hold its breath, waiting for violence to shatter the oppressive silence that hung over the landscape like a suffocating blanket. The village of Kala-i-Jangi appeared ahead like a mirage shimmering in the desert heat. Marcus could see smoke rising from several buildings, and, even at a distance, the signs of recent violence were unmistakable. Debris scattered across the main road, damaged walls pockmarked with shrapnel, and clusters of villagers moving frantically between buildings suggested the bomb explosion had been devastating and recent. Captain Williams ordered the convoy to establish a defensive perimeter at the village entrance while Dr. Matthews and her medical team prepared to treat casualties. The tactical situation required careful coordination. They needed to provide immediate medical assistance while maintaining security against potential enemy threats. Intelligence reports had warned of secondary explosions designed to target first responders, a tactic increasingly common among insurgent forces in the region. Marcus dismounted from his vehicle and immediately began scanning for threats while the medical team moved toward the reported casualty site. The village school was a modest single-story building constructed of mud brick and concrete, now partially collapsed from the explosion. Local villagers were digging through rubble with their bare hands, desperately searching for survivors trapped beneath the debris. An elderly man approached the soldiers with blood-stained clothes and tears streaming down his weathered face. He spoke rapidly in Pashto to their interpreter, Sergeant Ahmed Hassan, a naturalized American citizen whose family had immigrated from Afghanistan when he was a child. Ahmed's linguistic skills and cultural understanding made him invaluable for missions requiring interaction with local populations. "He says there are 6 children trapped under the collapsed roof," Ahmed translated. "They were attending afternoon classes when the bomb exploded. 3 children have been pulled out already, but they're badly injured and need immediate medical attention." Dr. Matthews wasted no time in establishing a triage area near the school entrance. Her training as a trauma physician had prepared her for mass casualty situations, but seeing injured children never became easier regardless of how many times she had dealt with similar scenes. Each young face reminded her of her own nephew back home in Ohio, a connection that made her even more determined to save every life possible. Marcus organized his soldiers to assist with search and rescue operations while maintaining defensive positions around the village perimeter. Private Chen worked alongside local villagers to clear debris, his youth and energy making him particularly effective at navigating the unstable wreckage. Despite his earlier nervousness, Chen had found his courage when faced with people who needed help, proving that true character often emerges under the most challenging circumstances. The first injured child was a girl approximately 8 years old with severe lacerations and possible internal injuries. Dr. Matthews worked quickly to stabilize her condition while preparing for medical evacuation back to the base hospital. The girl's eyes showed the kind of fear that transcended language barriers, a universal expression of pain and confusion that struck directly at the hearts of every soldier present. "We need to get her to surgical facilities immediately," Dr. Matthews announced. "Her condition is critical but treatable if we can get her proper care within the next hour." Marcus coordinated with Captain Williams to arrange emergency evacuation procedures. The original plan called for treating casualties on site and, then, transporting them to the base medical facility, but the severity of injuries was exceeding their field treatment capabilities. They needed helicopter medical evacuation, but weather conditions were still preventing air operations in the region. As the medical team worked to save lives, Marcus noticed movement in the hills surrounding the village. Through his binoculars, he could see figures moving between rocks and abandoned structures approximately 1 kilometer away. The movement patterns were too deliberate and coordinated to be civilians, suggesting enemy forces were positioning themselves for an attack on the rescue operation. "Control, this is Reaper 6, Marcus radioed urgently. "We have possible enemy movement in the hills north of our position. Request immediate intelligence update on known hostile forces in the area." The response came back with concerning news. "Reaper 6, intelligence indicates insurgent cell led by Abu Qasim has been active in your operational area. Cell consists of approximately 12 to 15 fighters armed with small arms, rocket-propelled grenades, and improvised explosive devices. High probability they are planning coordinated attack on your position." Captain Williams processed this information quickly and made a tactical decision that would define the mission outcome. They could abandon the rescue operation and withdraw to safety, potentially saving his soldiers but condemning the injured children to death. Alternatively, they could continue the mission despite the threat, accepting significant risk to save innocent lives. For Williams, the choice was clear: they had not come this far to abandon helpless children when they were needed most. "All stations, this is Reaper 6 Actual," Williams announced over the radio. "We continue mission as planned. Defensive positions are priority. We hold this ground until all casualties are evacuated or medical treatment is complete." The second injured child was a boy around 10 years old with compound fractures and severe burns covering 30% of his body. Dr. Matthews had seen similar injuries in previous attacks and knew the boy's survival depended entirely on getting him to advanced medical facilities within the next few hours. Field treatment could stabilize his condition temporarily, but without surgical intervention and specialized burn care, his chances of survival were minimal. As the medical team worked frantically to save lives, Marcus observed the tactical situation developing around them. The enemy movement in the hills was becoming more pronounced, with what appeared to be weapons positions being established overlooking the village. Intelligence reports suggested the insurgents were likely waiting for the right moment to launch a coordinated attack designed to inflict maximum casualties on both soldiers and civilians. Sergeant Johnson approached Marcus with updated intelligence from their communications specialist. "Rodriguez, we just intercepted enemy radio traffic indicating they're planning to attack during casualty evacuation procedures. They know we won't abandon wounded children, so they're using our humanity against us." This was the cruel reality of asymmetric warfare: enemies who deliberately targeted civilians to force military forces into impossible situations. The insurgents understood that American soldiers would risk their lives to save innocent children, and they planned to exploit that moral commitment for tactical advantage. It was a psychological warfare technique designed to turn strength into weakness and compassion into vulnerability. Marcus studied the terrain surrounding the village and identified the most likely attack routes. The enemy would probably use the high ground to the north for sniper positions while launching a ground assault from the eastern approach where cover and concealment were most favorable. Standard counter-ambush tactics called for immediate withdrawal under covering fire, but withdrawing meant abandoning the injured children to certain death. Dr. Matthews was making remarkable progress with the injured children despite working under primitive conditions. Her medical training and experience had taught her to prioritize cases based on survivability and available resources, but every child represented someone's future and hopes for a better life. The moral weight of medical triage decisions in combat situations was something civilian physicians rarely had to face. The third child brought to the medical station was unconscious with severe head trauma and multiple fractures. Dr. Matthews assessed his condition quickly and began emergency neurological intervention procedures designed to reduce brain swelling and prevent permanent damage. Her hands worked with practiced precision while her mind calculated survival probabilities and treatment options available under current circumstances. "We need surgical facilities immediately," Dr. Matthews announced to Captain Williams. "These injuries are beyond our field treatment capabilities. Without advanced care, we're going to lose at least 2 of these children within the next few hours." Williams faced an agonizing decision that would haunt him regardless of the outcome. Calling for helicopter evacuation would expose aircraft and aircrew to enemy fire while potentially compromising the safety of his ground forces. However, failing to request evacuation would condemn innocent children to preventable deaths. The moral complexity of combat leadership often came down to choosing between different types of terrible outcomes. Private Chen approached Marcus with urgent information from the villagers who were still searching through the rubble. "Sergeant, the village elder says there are definitely 3 more children trapped under the collapsed section of the school. They can hear voices, but the debris is too heavy for them to move without equipment." This presented another impossible choice: allocate soldiers to rescue operations, reducing defensive capability against the impending attack, or maintain security positions while potentially allowing trapped children to die. Marcus looked at the faces of his fellow soldiers and saw the same internal struggle he was experiencing. Every man wanted to save those children, but they also understood the tactical reality of their situation. Marcus made a command decision that reflected both his training and his character. "Chen, you and Jackson work with the villagers on rescue operations. Johnson, establish overwatch positions covering the northern approaches. Everyone else maintains defensive perimeter and provides security for medical operations." As his soldiers moved to execute these orders, Marcus couldn't help but think about the broader implications of their situation. These children represented the future of Afghanistan, the generation that would determine whether decades of international military intervention and development aid would result in lasting peace and prosperity. Saving their lives today might literally be saving the future of an entire nation. The enemy radio intercepts were becoming more frequent and urgent, suggesting the attack was imminent. Intelligence analysts at the base were working to decode communications and provide advance warning, but the insurgents were using communication techniques designed to avoid electronic surveillance. The cat-and-mouse game of modern warfare played out in radio frequencies and encrypted messages while real lives hung in the balance. Dr. Matthews had successfully stabilized 3 of the injured children and was beginning treatment on the 4th casualty when the first enemy sniper shot rang out across the village. The bullet struck the ground near the medical station, sending up a spray of dust and rock fragments that announced the beginning of what would become a desperate fight for survival. "Contact! Sniper fire from the north!" Marcus shouted as he dove for cover behind a concrete wall. "All stations, we are under enemy fire. Medical team, take cover immediately." The tactical situation had shifted from rescue operation to combat survival in a matter of seconds. Marcus knew they were outnumbered and outgunned, fighting an enemy that held the high ground and had chosen the time and place for engagement. But retreat was not an option as long as injured children needed medical attention and trapped survivors waited for rescue beneath tons of rubble. Captain Williams coordinated defensive fires while calling for immediate air support and artillery backup. The base operations center responded that attack helicopters were launching but would not arrive for at least 20 minutes due to distance and weather conditions. 20 minutes might as well be 20 hours when facing a coordinated enemy assault with limited ammunition and defensive positions. The sniper fire was joined by automatic weapons fire from multiple positions, creating a devastating crossfire that pinned down the soldiers and medical personnel. Dr. Matthews continued working on injured children despite bullets passing overhead, her medical oath compelling her to provide care regardless of personal danger. Her courage under fire inspired every soldier present and reminded them why they were fighting. Marcus coordinated return fire while assessing their tactical options. The enemy had achieved tactical surprise and held superior positions, but his soldiers had better training and equipment. Victory would depend on making the right decisions under extreme pressure while protecting both his men and the civilian casualties they had come to help. In combat, seconds could determine the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. The gunfire intensified as insurgent forces launched their coordinated assault on the village. Marcus could see muzzle flashes from at least 8 different positions in the surrounding hills, confirming intelligence estimates about enemy strength. The attackers had positioned themselves to create overlapping fields of fire that would make movement across open ground virtually impossible for the trapped soldiers and medical personnel. Dr. Matthews refused to abandon her patients despite bullets striking the ground around her makeshift medical station. She had successfully stabilized 4 injured children and was working on the 5th when shrapnel from a rocket-propelled grenade explosion grazed her left arm. Blood soaked through her uniform sleeve, but she continued working with single-minded determination that impressed even the most experienced combat veterans. Private Chen and Jackson had managed to locate the 3 trapped children beneath the collapsed school roof, but extracting them required heavy equipment they didn't have. The boys worked desperately with crowbars and manual leverage to shift concrete slabs weighing hundreds of pounds while enemy fire cracked overhead. Their youth and determination seemed to multiply their strength as they fought against time and physics to save innocent lives. Captain Williams established a command post behind the village mosque, using the thick stone walls for protection while coordinating defensive fires and calling for immediate reinforcement. The tactical radio crackled with urgent communications as base operations worked frantically to organize relief forces and air support. Every minute that passed increased the likelihood that the small rescue force would be overwhelmed by superior enemy numbers. "All stations, this is Control," the radio announced. "Fast-mover aircraft are inbound to your position with estimated time of arrival 15 minutes. Helicopter gunships are launching but weather conditions are marginal for operations in your area." 15 minutes might as well have been 15 hours given their current situation. Marcus calculated ammunition expenditure rates and realized they would be running critically low on defensive fires within 10 minutes unless they could break contact or receive immediate resupply. The enemy seemed to understand this limitation and was increasing the intensity of their assault accordingly. Sergeant Johnson had established an observation post on the roof of a partially damaged building where he could direct defensive fires and provide early warning of enemy movement. Through his scope, he could see insurgent fighters maneuvering to surround the village and cut off potential escape routes. The tactical picture was deteriorating rapidly, but Johnson noticed something that might provide a tactical advantage. "Rodriguez, this is Johnson," he radioed urgently. "I've got eyes on what appears to be the enemy command element approximately 800 meters north of our position. Looks like they're coordinating the attack from a hilltop position near those old ruins." Marcus processed this information quickly and realized it presented a unique opportunity. If they could neutralize the enemy command element, it might disrupt the coordinated assault long enough for air support to arrive. However, reaching that position would require someone to cross nearly a kilometer of open ground under enemy fire, essentially a suicide mission under current circumstances. The radio crackled with an incoming transmission from base operations. "Reaper 6, this is Control. Be advised that Colonel Patterson is inbound to your location via helicopter with a medical evacuation team. Estimated time of arrival 10 minutes. This news brought both relief and concern to the embattled soldiers. Colonel Patterson was the brigade commander, a decorated veteran of multiple combat deployments who had earned legendary status for his battlefield leadership. However, his presence at their location would significantly raise the stakes of the mission and could result in a strategic disaster if enemy forces succeeded in their assault. Dr. Matthews had successfully treated 5 injured children and was preparing them for medical evacuation when the 6th and most critically injured child was brought to her station. The boy, approximately 7 years old, had multiple penetrating wounds and was losing blood faster than field transfusion procedures could replace it. Without immediate surgical intervention, he would die within minutes. "I need to perform emergency surgery right here," Dr. Matthews announced to Captain Williams. "This child won't survive transport to medical facilities. We have to operate now or we lose him." Williams understood the implications of this decision. Performing field surgery would require Dr. Matthews to remain stationary for at least 30 minutes, making her vulnerable to enemy fire and preventing medical evacuation of the other injured children. It was another impossible choice between saving one life or potentially saving many, complicated by the deteriorating tactical situation. Marcus made a decision that would define his military career and, possibly, his entire life. He approached Captain Williams with a proposal that was either brilliant or insane, depending on your perspective. "Sir, give me Johnson and Chen. We're going to take out that command post and buy time for the doctor to complete surgery and for air support to arrive." Williams stared at Marcus for a long moment, understanding immediately what such a mission would entail. 3 soldiers attempting to assault a fortified enemy position across open ground while under fire was textbook suicide. However, it might also be their only chance to save the injured children and prevent the mission from becoming a complete disaster. "That's not a plan, Rodriguez." "That's a death wish," Williams replied grimly. "Sir, we're all going to die anyway if we stay here. At least this way we have a chance to accomplish something meaningful before it happens. Those children didn't ask to be caught in the middle of this war, but they're depending on us to get them out alive." Williams looked at the injured children Dr. Matthews was treating and, then, at the determined faces of his soldiers. Every man understood the stakes and the odds, but none of them had joined the military to play it safe when innocent lives were at risk. After a moment that seemed to last forever, Williams nodded his approval. "Make it count, Sergeant. And make it fast." Marcus gathered Johnson and Chen for a quick tactical briefing while enemy fire continued to impact around their position. The plan was simple in concept but complex in execution. Use the terrain features and available cover to approach the enemy command post, neutralize the leadership element, and withdraw before reinforcing insurgents could respond. Success would require perfect timing, exceptional marksmanship, and a considerable amount of luck. "Listen up," Marcus briefed his 2 volunteers. "We move fast and light, using fire and maneuver tactics to close with the target. Johnson, you're our designated marksman. Your job is to take out the command element with precision fires. Chen, you provide suppressive fire and watch our backs during withdrawal. I'll coordinate movement and handle any close combat situations." The 3 soldiers checked their equipment one final time before beginning what could be their last mission. Marcus carried additional ammunition and grenades, Johnson had his precision rifle and spotting scope, and Chen was loaded with automatic weapon magazines and emergency medical supplies. Each man understood that survival depended entirely on their collective skills and the unpredictable nature of combat. Dr. Matthews had begun emergency surgery on the critically injured boy using improvised instruments and limited anesthesia. Her hands worked with practiced precision while bullets continued to crack overhead, demonstrating the kind of courage under fire that defined the best military medical personnel. The other injured children watched with frightened eyes as their friend fought for his life on a makeshift operating table. Marcus led his small assault team out of the village using a drainage ditch that provided concealment from enemy observation. The approach to the target would take them through a series of rocky outcroppings and abandoned farm buildings that offered limited cover but represented their best chance of reaching the objective undetected. Every step forward increased their exposure to enemy fire while taking them farther from friendly support. The enemy command post was positioned on a hilltop that provided excellent observation of the village and surrounding terrain. Through his binoculars, Johnson could see several insurgent fighters coordinating radio communications and directing fires against the trapped soldiers below. Taking out this position would disrupt enemy coordination and possibly cause the assault to falter long enough for reinforcements to arrive. Halfway to their objective, the assault team encountered an enemy patrol that was apparently moving to reinforce the main assault force. Marcus made a split-second decision to engage the patrol before they could alert other insurgent forces to the flanking maneuver. The brief firefight lasted only seconds but confirmed their presence to enemy forces throughout the area. "So much for stealth," Johnson muttered as they continued toward the command post. "Now they know we're coming." Marcus checked his watch and calculated timing for air support arrival and medical evacuation procedures. They had approximately 8 minutes to complete their mission and withdraw before friendly aircraft arrived on station. Any delay would put both the assault team and incoming aircraft at risk from enemy fires and possible surface-to-air missiles. The final approach to the enemy command post required crossing 200 meters of open ground with minimal cover. Marcus studied the terrain carefully and identified a route that would minimize exposure time while providing opportunities for suppressive fire during movement. The success of their mission depended entirely on speed, accuracy, and the element of surprise they had already partially lost. "Remember, we go in fast and hit hard," Marcus reminded his teammates. "Johnson, you take the shot as soon as you have a clear target. Chen and I will provide suppressive fire and handle any immediate threats. Once Johnson fires, we withdraw immediately, no heroics, no unnecessary risks." The three soldiers prepared for their assault while Dr. Matthews continued emergency surgery in the village below. Everything depended on perfect execution and split-second timing that would determine whether 6 innocent children lived or died. Combat had a way of reducing complex moral questions to simple equations of courage and skill under extreme pressure. Johnson settled into a firing position approximately 300 meters from the enemy command post and began calculating range, wind speed, and target movement patterns. Through his scope, he could see the insurgent commander coordinating radio communications while other fighters prepared weapons and ammunition for continued assault. One shot would have to be perfect to disrupt enemy operations and save the lives depending on their success. The radio crackled with an incoming transmission. "Reaper 6, this is Falcon 1-1. We are inbound to your position with close air support. Request immediate target information and friendly position updates." Marcus knew they had run out of time for careful planning and deliberate execution. The assault would have to happen now, before air support arrived and complicated the tactical picture with friendly fire concerns. He looked at Johnson and Chen, seeing his own determination reflected in their young faces, and made the decision that would either save 6 lives or cost 3 more. "Execute! Execute! Execute!" Johnson's rifle shot echoed across the desert landscape like thunder, the sound seeming to hang in the air for an eternal moment before reality crashed back down around them. Through his scope, Marcus watched the insurgent commander collapse immediately, the single bullet having found its mark with devastating precision. The effect on enemy forces was instantaneous and dramatic. Radio communications ceased, coordinated fire slackened, and visible confusion spread among the remaining fighters. "Target down! Target down!" Johnson shouted as he immediately began preparing for withdrawal. The precision shot had achieved exactly what they hoped, disrupting enemy command and control at the critical moment when their assault was reaching maximum intensity. But Marcus knew they had perhaps minutes before enemy forces reorganized and began hunting for the source of the shot that had killed their leader. Chen provided suppressive fire as the 3-man team began their withdrawal toward the village. Enemy fighters were already moving to investigate the command post, and return fire was beginning to focus on their general area. The element of surprise that had made their mission possible was now completely gone, replaced by the urgent need to reach friendly lines before being surrounded and overwhelmed. Dr. Matthews was completing her emergency surgery when the sound of Johnson's rifle shot caused her to look up momentarily from her patient. The young boy on her improvised operating table was stable but critical, requiring continued monitoring and eventual evacuation to proper medical facilities. Around her, the other 5 injured children waited with the kind of patience that only comes from not understanding how close death had come to claiming them. Captain Williams coordinated defensive fires while tracking the progress of Marcus's assault team through radio communications. The tactical situation remained desperate, but the disruption of enemy command had provided a window of opportunity that might allow them to survive until air support arrived. Every decision made in the next few minutes would determine whether their rescue mission succeeded or failed catastrophically. "Control, this is Reaper 6, Williams radioed urgently. Assault team has neutralized enemy command element. Request immediate update on close air support and medical evacuation assets." The response came back immediately. "Reaper 6, this is Control. Fast movers are 30 seconds out and standing by for target designation. Colonel Patterson's medical evacuation helicopter is inbound and will be on station in approximately 4 minutes." Marcus and his team reached the village perimeter just as enemy forces launched a desperate counterattack designed to overrun their position before air support could arrive. Insurgent fighters advanced from multiple directions, using covering fire and tactical movement that demonstrated they were experienced combatants rather than untrained militants. The battle was entering its most critical phase when training, equipment, and determination would determine the final outcome. Johnson established a new firing position and began engaging targets of opportunity while Chen distributed ammunition to other soldiers whose supply was running critically low. Marcus coordinated defensive fires while maintaining radio communication with incoming aircraft. The coordination required split-second timing and perfect communication to avoid friendly fire incidents that could prove catastrophic. Falcon 1-1, this is Reaper 6 on the ground, Marcus radioed to the approaching aircraft. We have friendly forces at grid reference 41 SMD 12345 67890 and enemy forces attacking from the north, east, and west. Request immediate close air support on enemy positions while avoiding civilian structures in the village center. The lead pilot responded immediately, copy Reaper 6. We have eyes on your position and are identifying enemy forces. Stand by for immediate air support, keep your heads down. The sound of approaching jets grew louder until it became a deafening roar that seemed to shake the very foundations of the earth. Marcus watched enemy fighters begin to withdraw from their assault positions as they recognized the distinctive sound of incoming airstrikes. The psychological effect of close air support often proved as valuable as the actual destructive capability. Dr. Matthews was securing her surgical patient for evacuation when the first airstrike impacted enemy positions in the surrounding hills. The explosion was massive and precise, eliminating an entire enemy fighting position while avoiding any damage to civilian structures or friendly forces. Secondary explosions indicated the strike had hit an ammunition cache or weapons storage area. Colonel Patterson's helicopter appeared on the horizon like salvation itself, the aircraft flying low and fast toward the village while providing additional suppressive fire against remaining enemy positions. The colonel was known throughout the brigade for personally leading rescue operations and never abandoning soldiers in contact with enemy forces. His presence at their location would ensure maximum resources were committed to their successful extraction. The helicopter landed in a cloud of dust and debris while enemy small arms fire continued to crack overhead. Colonel Patterson immediately dismounted with his medical team and advanced toward Dr. Matthews's treatment area. His presence on the ground provided additional command authority and ensured that casualty evacuation would proceed regardless of continued enemy threat. Doctor, what's the status on your patients? Colonel Patterson asked Dr. Matthews as his medical team prepared advanced life support equipment. Sir, I have 6 injured children ready for immediate evacuation. 5 are stable for transport, but 1 just came out of emergency surgery and requires constant monitoring during flight. All 6 need advanced medical care that's only available at the base hospital. Colonel Patterson assessed the tactical situation quickly and made decisions that reflected both his experience and his commitment to saving lives. We evacuate all 6 children immediately. My aircraft can handle the critical patient while a second helicopter takes the others. No one gets left behind. Marcus and his assault team provided security for the evacuation operations while enemy forces regrouped for what appeared to be a final assault attempt. The insurgents understood that allowing the children to be evacuated would represent a significant propaganda defeat in addition to the tactical failure of their ambush. Desperation was making them increasingly aggressive and unpredictable. The first helicopter lifted off with 3 of the injured children while Dr. Matthews accompanied her surgical patient on Colonel Patterson's aircraft. The evacuation proceeded smoothly despite continued enemy fire, demonstrating the skill and courage of military helicopter crews who routinely risked their lives to save others. Within minutes, all 6 children were airborne and en route to life-saving medical treatment. As the helicopters disappeared into the distance, Marcus felt a profound sense of relief mixed with exhaustion. The mission had succeeded beyond their most optimistic expectations. 6 children had been saved and enemy forces had been defeated with minimal friendly casualties. However, he knew that difficult questions would be asked about the decisions made during the operation. Colonel Patterson remained on the ground long enough to conduct a preliminary after-action review with Captain Williams and the other soldiers involved in the rescue operation. His questions were pointed and professional, focusing on tactical decisions and rules of engagement compliance rather than second-guessing the moral choices that had driven their actions. Captain Williams, who authorized this mission given the high threat assessment and limited air support availability? Colonel Patterson asked during his initial debriefing. Williams straightened his shoulders and looked directly at his superior officer. Sir, I authorized the mission based on humanitarian necessity and the moral obligation to save innocent lives. Intelligence indicated injured children requiring immediate medical assistance, and I determined the mission was worth the associated risks. Colonel Patterson studied Williams for a long moment before responding. His expression was unreadable, giving no indication whether he approved or disapproved of the captain's decision. The colonel understood better than most that combat leadership often required making impossible choices with incomplete information under extreme pressure. And the assault on the enemy command post? Who authorized a three-man team to attack a fortified position across open ground, the colonel continued. Marcus stepped forward before Captain Williams could respond. Sir, I proposed and led that assault. The decision was mine based on tactical necessity and the requirement to protect medical personnel completing life-saving surgery. We assessed the risk and determined it was acceptable given the potential to save 6 lives. The colonel turned his attention to Marcus with the kind of intense scrutiny that had made him legendary among the soldiers under his command. Sergeant Rodriguez, that was either the bravest or most foolish thing I've ever heard of. Perhaps both. What made you think 3 soldiers could successfully assault a defended position against superior numbers? Marcus considered his response carefully before speaking. Sir, we weren't trying to win a conventional engagement. We were trying to disrupt enemy command and control long enough for air support to arrive and medical evacuation to succeed. The mission parameters were different from standard combat operations. Colonel Patterson nodded slowly, his expression revealing nothing about his assessment of the operation. The results speak for themselves. 6 children are alive who would otherwise be dead, enemy forces have been defeated, and all friendly personnel are accounted for. However, the methods used raise serious questions about risk assessment and command authority. The after-action review continued for another 30 minutes as Colonel Patterson gathered detailed information about every aspect of the mission. His questions covered everything from initial intelligence assessments to individual soldier performance under fire. The thoroughness of his inquiry suggested that this operation would be studied and analyzed far beyond the immediate tactical level. As they prepared to return to base, Marcus reflected on the events of the day and their broader implications. 6 children would grow up because soldiers had been willing to risk everything to save innocent lives. Enemy forces had been defeated through courage, skill, and precise application of military power. But difficult questions remained about the cost of such victories and the sustainability of operations driven primarily by moral imperatives rather than strategic objectives. The convoy ride back to forward operating base Delta passed quietly, each soldier lost in his own thoughts about what they had experienced and accomplished. Dr. Matthews rode in the medical vehicle monitoring the condition of her patients while mentally preparing reports for her superiors about field surgical procedures performed under combat conditions. Colonel Patterson flew ahead in his helicopter, already composing the reports that would be required to explain and justify the day's operations to higher command authorities. The political and strategic implications of the mission would be debated in conference rooms far from the battlefield, where decisions about future operations would be made by people who had never heard gunfire or seen injured children. That evening, as Marcus cleaned his equipment and prepared his own after-action report, he received word that all 6 children were expected to make full recoveries. The news provided validation for every risk they had taken and every decision they had made during those desperate hours in Kala'ijangi. Sometimes, the moral clarity of saving innocent lives overcame the tactical complexity of asymmetric warfare. 3 days later, Marcus was called to Colonel Patterson's office for a private meeting that would determine his future in the military. He entered the colonel's quarters uncertain whether he would be commended for heroism or disciplined for exceeding his authority. The ambiguity reflected the complex nature of modern warfare where individual initiative often conflicted with institutional procedures. Colonel Patterson was studying a thick file when Marcus entered and saluted. Sergeant Rodriguez, I've been reviewing your personnel record and the details of the Kala'ijangi operation. Your actions raise important questions about command authority and tactical decision-making under pressure. Marcus maintained his military bearing while waiting for the colonel to continue. The uncertainty was almost worse than knowing he faced disciplinary action. In combat, at least, the consequences of decisions were usually immediate and clear. In the military bureaucracy, consequences could be delayed and ambiguous for weeks or months. However, Colonel Patterson continued, the results of your actions speak louder than procedural concerns. 6 children are alive today because you and your team were willing to risk everything to save them. That kind of moral courage and tactical innovation is exactly what we need in our non-commissioned officers. The colonel closed the file and looked directly at Marcus. I'm recommending you for promotion to staff sergeant and assignment as a squad leader in our most experienced infantry unit. Your actions at Kala Ijangi demonstrate exactly the kind of leadership this brigade needs for future operations. Marcus felt a mixture of relief and pride, tempered by the knowledge that such recognition came with increased responsibility for the lives of other soldiers. Thank you, sir. I won't let you down. I know you won't, Sergeant. But, I also want you to understand something important. What you did that day was heroic, but it was also incredibly dangerous. In the future, make sure you're thinking about the broader implications of your actions and coordinating with higher command whenever possible. As Marcus left the colonel's office, he thought about the 6 children who were recovering in military hospitals and would soon return to their families. Their lives had been saved by soldiers who understood that sometimes the greatest victories came not from defeating enemies, but from protecting the innocent people caught in the crossfire of conflicts they never chose to join. The war in Afghanistan would continue for several more years, with countless other operations and missions that would test the courage and character of American soldiers. But, for Marcus Rodriguez and the men who served with him that day in Kala Ijangi, there would always be the knowledge that they had faced an impossible situation and chosen to do what was right, regardless of the cost. Sometimes, one shot really could save 6 lives if the person taking it was willing to risk everything for people who couldn't defend themselves.